Now moving on, there are different kinds of definitions within a line. So these are specific definitions within a line. So a segment. So literally, if I take a whole line and I chop it up into different kind of subparts. So if I take this whole line and I decide to chop it up from here to here or from here to here. So these segments, these are called segments. These would have a beginning point and an end point. For instance, they would begin at A, end at B. Similarly, they could begin at C, end at D. So these are what we call as line segments. So a segment always has two endpoints, A and B. It is not extending beyond A, it's not extending beyond D, but it is a straight line. So a segment is literally, if you take a straight line and you cut it, you get segments, tiny segments, and that's what is called as a segment. A segment has two endpoints, one on each side. The endpoint is a point that is, on each side of the segment. Okay, very simple. On the other hand, let us say I just cut it off at one point and it extends all the way from the other side. Then it is what is called as a ray. The best way to look at rays is look at rays of the sun, right? So let's say we have the sun up here in the sky. So we have the sun, okay? And we have something going out. It starts from here and it goes all the way to the earth. Similarly, we have rays of the sun. Remember, we all drew this stuff. When we were small, we drew rays of the sun. That's the easiest way to remember a ray. So a ray has only one endpoint out here, and it extends indefinitely on the other side. Okay. Opposite rays, on the other hand, so if I have a common endpoint like E, I have one ray that goes in this direction, and I have the other ray that goes in the opposite direction. So those are typically what are called opposite rays. So that being said, let's try to see if we can identify them or draw them. Now let's try to draw a segment with endpoints of M and N. So we know a segment is basically a line with two endpoints. So we've got a point here, we've got a point here. We'll label this point as M and this point as N. And now we know that we have a segment with endpoints M and N. Let's try to draw an opposite rays with a common endpoint T, which means I have T over here. I can draw one ray, goes this way. Opposite to it, I can draw another ray that goes this way. Okay, so this is an example of two rays with a common endpoint T. I can call this ray TA and ray TB. Remember, the ray always starts with the letter from which it starts and ends with the letter that it extends to. Similarly, starts here, ends here. So anytime you see something like this, the common start point, you know that they meet each other. Okay. The third example that we have to draw is a ray with an endpoint of S going through Q. So we know that a ray is basically has one endpoint, and we know it is S. We just said that here, and it's going through point Q, which means it's going beyond Q as well. And typically this is labeled as the ray S to Q because we know it terminates at S, so endpoint is S, and it goes on forever at Q. That being said, let's continue solving some of this. Let's look at this figure out here, and let's see if we can name two opposite rays. So opposite rays are again rays with a common endpoint which extend in one direction and are opposite directions. So example would be if I consider this situation out here, okay, I can say, well, C to B is a ray. I go from C to B, okay, it extends beyond B, and C to D is another ray, starts at C, extends beyond D. I could also identify another pair here, and that pair could be up and down. Of course, I don't know what this down thing is called. That's why I stick to this. Number 5, name a point on the ray BC. So let's say, it actually should be line BC, I think. So a point on the ray BC. So this is the ray BC. This part is the ray BC. So I know it's either a B is on it as well as C is on it. Next, we want to know the intersection of the two planes, plane N and plane T. Okay, intersection of these planes. Now, when two planes intersect, they intersect along this line. So two planes always intersect along a line. All we have to do is name this line. We know there are 2 points on this line, B and D, and the line extends on either side. So the intersection of two planes is always a line. Now it says, the last one, it says name a plane that contains the points E, D, and B. So let's look for them. Let's say E is over here, D is over here, and B is over here. So all these 3 points are in the horizontal plane, right? They are all in the horizontal plane. B and D could be in the vertical plane as well, but E is definitely not in the vertical plane. So this would be our plane, which is stylized as T. Okay, so that would be our plane. You could also call this plane as EDB if you wanted, or any combination of those 3 letters. Moving on, let's draw each of the following. A line intersecting a plane at one point. So first you draw a plane. As we said, a plane is just a structure this is the representation of a plane. Let's call it plane P. Okay, it's just a representation of a plane. And the next thing we need to do is we need to draw a line that intersects at only one point. That is, the line passes through this plane. So the line would pass through a point C. This is one end of the line. And I would draw the other end of a line as a shaded line because we cannot see it through the plane, right? And so imagine there is and let's call this line L. Okay, so imagine there is a paper plane and we pass L through it. Okay, we hit a pencil through it. You won't be able to see this part of the entire thing because it's hidden by the plane. So we generally draw these as dotted lines. Case in point, over here, if you see, we drew this as a dotted line. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's the same situation. Let's go to the next problem. You have to draw a ray with an endpoint of P that passes through Q. So we have a ray. A ray starts from one point and keeps going one direction. We know that this ray has an endpoint of P, that is, it ends at P and it passes through another point, Q. Okay, this is better Q. So this is how we can represent a ray. So in the exam, in the test, you'll definitely have combinations of these problems. You may have to draw things, okay? So that being said, next, once you've done this, you can work on your assignment and try to complete it. Again, I grade for completion, so just take a shot at it and we'll go over it in the next class. So thank you for watching this video.